What's up and welcome to the Purple and Gold Roundtable Talk. I'm your host, Haven. Here we're going to be discussing various topics that may impact our community and our culture. I'm honored to have these two guests with me right here. I'll let them introduce themselves. First, we'll start with Maryo.
All right, I'm Maryo Beck. I am the current Basileus of the Kappa chapter. Currently, I work for Hamilton County Schools. I've been educated for 22 years. I've been in this lovely, great fraternity for 28 years. Devoted Christian, loving father, loving husband at times, but
blessings,
all the time. But yeah, just that's me.
Man, that is a blessing. You put some time in. Love to hear. All right, what you got, Reggie?
I'm Reginald Smith.
Yes, sir.
I am just like Brother Beck here. I am a loving husband, loving father, devoted husband and father. I am currently serving as the executive director of the Bethlehem Center here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Been a member of the fraternity Omega Psi Phi for about 17 years now. I'm a life member of the fraternity and happy to be here today.
Man, I love to hear it. Today's topic is Juneteenth. I like that. Y'all both like, it's a good topic, ain't it? Yes,
definitely.
Yes.
Timely.
We need to be talking about this.
Yes.
It's well overdue. That's came to mainstream, put it that way. But so I have a question, basically about the significance of Juneteenth today, right? So what does that look like for you all? What are you seeing in the community and the significance of it in 2022? Either way.
I'll take it. I'll start us off.
All right, let's do it.
You know, I'm glad that we have started to recognize the significance of African Americans in this country and really celebrating us. It's interesting. I told my wife this a long time ago when the Olympics was in Brazil. If you look at the Olympics in Brazil, they was true to themselves. They did not shy away from who they were. And I felt for a long time as African Americans in our culture, we were shying away because it wasn't popular to others. And now we're bringing in Juneteenth and all these celebrations. We're recognizing that we have a voice and that our culture, no matter whether you agree with it or not, is our culture. And so I love to see the fact that it's now mainstream and now it's becoming more acceptable.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I always thought it was crazy. We have other Independence Days and different things for different cultures when they broke freedom and these type situations. I mean, if you talk to anybody, everybody has celebrated, had a drink on Cinco de Mayo, right? Everybody's had a margarita. Everybody's had a beer on St. Patty's Day.
Right.
Why we didn't have anything for Juneteenth, So I definitely agree with that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Brother Beck here with that. One thing I would like to add, I guess, as a person who grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and someone whose family really instilled upon me a desire to know more about my culture and my people, and knowing about Juneteenth and celebrating Juneteenth as a kid, it's good to see that it is now being more appropriate that the federal government is now recognizing it and that the world is having an opportunity to be educated on it. I think that it's an opportunity for us as a community of African Americans in this country to actually make sure that the newer generations really truly understand the purpose of it, though. Because just to have a day in which we can celebrate to say it's ours is good, but how do we dig a little deeper to explain the rationale as to why it even existed, right? Yeah. Why there was a need to have emancipation, why there was a need for our people to, have something of our own in this country when for so many years we didn't have that recognition. So the educator in me wants to take this and make it a teachable moment.
So that's what I was going to ask. So both you all in a position where you deal with youth and educating them. Is there any, even though it's mainstream now, has there been anything implemented for the children to learn about Juneteenth and the history?
Not currently. I think it needs to become more popular in terms of
really.
It's just in the country. Because right now, people are scared to talk about those things that are in a sense, our history that is not very pretty. And with the whole critical race theory, people are afraid to address certain topics because they don't want certain people to feel a certain way. But if you address the topic correctly, everybody's going to get an understanding and be educated on it. Whites, Black, Hispanics, or whatever. So I think, it's when we become comfortable with having those uncomfortable conversations and in a place where no one is offended. We're just speaking truth, and we're trying to come to an understanding so that we can move forward. Because right now, I believe that's the reason why we're not able to move forward like we should, because we don't have an understanding of each other. We're still fighting at odds and talking about, well, this happened or that happened, and you did this to me, and your parents did this, and we're upset about it. But we got to come to an understanding of who we are together and move forward together. So once we're able to do that, we're able to have those conversations freely.
It's good. It's good.
I'm going to piggyback off of that and say I totally agree 100% with what you just said, especially in larger organizations that have to have the protocols in place to be able to issue that type of stuff. At the same time, I'm really encouraged. This morning, I was at New Monumental Baptist Church with a summer program that we support through my organization. And there was a gentleman there by the name of Coach Leroy Alexander. And he has a summer program, and they were working on arts-based project for the Juneteenth festival that they're doing at New Monumental. So I took that as a moment to say, okay, y'all making art for Juneteenth. What is Juneteenth? I had two young men raise their hand and say, this is what Juneteenth is about. It's the day that we became free in this country. One young man said, and the other guy said, I'm going to clean it up for him. That was the day that the enslaved Africans that were in Galveston, Texas, finally became, free because they were emancipated a couple of years early. But the thing about that was that it showed me that there are pockets of organizations and groups that are teaching that. My organization is doing an event on November, not November, I'm out right now. My organization is doing an event on June 18th, the day before June 19th, because it falls on a Sunday this year. But we are trying our best to make sure that our students know about it instead of, since we're having an event about it, opposed to it just being something that's out there in the ether. Because so many times other organizations and other groups might co-opt it and commercialize it a tad bit. So we're trying our best to make sure that we, do what we have to do to ensure that kids can get there. And I think over time, you're right, as it becomes more of a popular thing, larger organizations will bring that on, but it's still an uphill battle because people are still trying to reconcile the history and what it truly means.
Yes, that's great. Now, is your event open to the community with the children?
Yes, by all means. It's not for the children, actually.
Great.
It's happening in our community, but our Juneteenth event takes place on our property at 200 West 38th Street in South Chattanooga. But it is for the African-American community as a whole. And it's really built upon making sure that we can provide economic opportunities for everybody who's a small business owner that is an African-American. The idea behind that is that, like I know, everybody in our community got a side hustle. At the same time, there's some really good businesses that have been born out of this pandemic. Well, part of it is how do we educate the community about Juneteenth, as well as how do we have a hook to bring people to learn about Juneteenth. And that's where the economic piece comes available. But yes, it's from 1 to 4, and it will be open to the public and free.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. All right, okay. Now you talk about the economy and the economic side of this, right? And as y'all know, we were at one point supposed to get 40 acres and a mule. So, and I'll be honest, man, what you said was very important about not knowing things when you kind of brought up and how it's important to teach the youth that, like you said as well. So I always heard the term 40 acres and a mule, 40 acres and a mule. What I did not know is that it was actually retracted. Like it was promised at one point to us, and then it was actually taken back, right? Voted down. I didn't know that. So in today's terms, if that was going to be brought up again as far as reparations for us, what would that look like in you all's perspective?
Wow.
That's a loaded question.
It is, bro.
Unpack it.
Economic support, I think, going back to just providing, first of all, the knowledge of economics and wealth and how to manage and maintain it. Because I think where we were slighted in not receiving our 40 acres and a mule was we weren't afforded the opportunity to build generational wealth just through the sharecropping or through farming the land. Because when, the enslaved were free, they had an opportunity to farm land and to build economic wealth through that because cotton was king. I think I read somewhere it was like 2/3% of the U.S. economy was based off of cotton alone. it was profitable because, they had free labor. But think about if we, after we were free, were able to farmland, do what you brought us here to do, but now reap the benefits of it through selling it through the economy like everybody else was doing, then we could pass that down. So I think now I don't see us, just, handing out checks. I just can't see that. That's not a feasible thing to do. One is going to drive inflation through the roof. But I do think, just supporting Black-owned businesses, giving that opportunity, maybe providing additional ways for Black business owners can prosper, receive loans or receive grants or things of that nature to flourish their business. Those side hustles can now become actual businesses instead of something I just do over here because right now I don't have the means to launch that right now.
Yes, yeah, I love it. You made a great point. I mean, education is going to be the key.
Yeah, definitely.
I was talking to my wife actually about it and really understanding of how we can get grants and loans and these type of things and as being a Black business owner. And that's something that I think was lacking. Like I at the same time, I've never received a grant. I don't even know how to really look for one, right? And I think that education is a missing piece within the community. It could definitely uplift us in that manner. So I definitely agree with that. Now, reparation on your side, does it kind of look similar? Do you think it's a little bit different?
No, I think what he said was pretty spot on. Because I think right now, to create an economic valuation of what 40 acres and a mule looks like today, in reference to what it would have been in, the end of the Civil War in 1865, right? I think we would be hard pressed for, number one, Congress wouldn't pass something like that. Democrat, Republican, regardless. They're not going to, because it would do exactly what Brother Beck said about inflated, one, to put too much market and money in circulation with one particular group of people. It would create a economic frenzy in which people would just prey on the African American community to get all their money. Without the education piece, and we all see this all the time. You see people who have a windfall because of somebody passing away and leaving them life insurance. A year later, they're broke, right? You would see a situation in which people win the lottery. They don't know how to manage the money. So it is definitely an educational piece to that. But I think there is something to be said about the federal government owning up to the fact that there has never been a historical righting of the original wrong. And so the question becomes, what do we do to support righting the wrong without creating additional problems? And that's a hard thing to do. There's a book by Deborah Strong called Policy Paradox. Whenever you create a public policy that affects a group of people, there's always going to be a paradox created that will unintentionally affect the other side, right? Or other groups of people. So going back and looking at issues that address that are plagues to the community today and figuring out how we can affect those in a positive manner that doesn't disproportionately hurt another group of people might be better. We're talking about things right now like student loan forgiveness. Okay, well, a lot of African Americans are first generation college students got a lot of student loans, right? How do we create strategic situations to address the fact that the generations before this individual were not able to go to school, so they didn't have the training or the understanding or the wisdom or the education to know that you have to approach getting scholarships or getting grants to go to school. How do we have targeted aid for that particular group? Or how do we look at areas that have historically been redlined in various different communities that historically couldn't build wealth because they were marked on maps to not have equity in their homes? How do we right that historic wrong? You can't use a shotgun approach for saying, well, if you can trace your history back to the enslaved people, you get some money. Instead, why don't we look at where are people struggling today, while also acknowledging that there are some African Americans who've worked extremely hard to get out of those circumstances, and though they should be eligible, maybe they shouldn't be eligible for this particular aid because you don't need it. It's almost like giving Tylenol to somebody who doesn't have a headache, right? You want to address the problem that exists and fix that. And so, whereas this is not my area of expertise, I do kind of dibble and dabble in wanting to understand more about public policy. But for that particular thing there with reparations, looking at what issues actually affect the African American community, putting time, energy, and money and funding into supporting those issues, knowing that they are systemic and that they are based upon the fact that the historical inequity, in inequalities that have hit that community have led to this, I think will probably be the best approach toward looking at having a real meaningful conversation, because everybody can address the fact that this group of people here are suffering from this particular problem. Let's address that problem. But when you do a shotgun approach and say all Black people, that's going to be an unpopular opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
But all Black people are not in need of help right now. But the ones that are should get specific assistance because of the historical circumstances that possibly led them to be where they are.
Okay, so what would they look like as determining who would need the help and who wouldn't? Because on the outside looking in, there's a lot of people you may see that may look like they have it all together, went to college, good jobs, like you said, may have the debt, or just other. There may be other burdens that are impacting their household, right? But they're not they're not lower class. They may be lower middle class, but still barely getting by, right? So how would you, I don't know if you kind of thought about that, but how can you help that specific population as well?
So you have to look at measurable things, right? So like we said one about student loans. Well, do you have student loans? It's a means test type thing, right? Okay. So do you have student loans? Yes. Well, then you eligible.
Right. I got you.
You see what I'm
saying? Just find something very specific.
Yeah. So
very
tailored. You have to be, very tightly prescribed toward what you're looking for. Historically, when America creates, we're gonna use this word, welfare programs, and I'm gonna use an unpopular welfare program that is extremely popular that helped Americans gain wealth. But after the Second World War, the federal government created programs for veterans to actually be able to buy homes. A lot of African Americans were historically denied ability to be able to go into those programs and purchase a home in certain communities, right? So we can look at historical records and data because that wasn't
still
too far
seeing
away.
that now. I mean, there's articles going on now with present times banks doing that. Right.
And so the idea is that data is out there. We can look at that, right?
Yeah.
So I go back to you can't judge another man's pockets, right?
Understood.
And so when I say have moved forth and need this type of thing, if it's a tightly prescribed issue that you can address through public policy, like a student loan forgiveness type of deal for individuals who are first generation college students, we can say chances are the reason why you are a first generation college student, it's a lot of different reasons, right? Yeah. But there are individuals who are not first generation, which means that parents went to school. Yeah. So their parents may have instilled certain types of wisdom. Now I'm not saying that that's not a popular thing to say, but you can tightly describe that.
Let me ask you this. All right. When you get these lists together, please put me on one of those lists. Because it doesn't matter what, on the outside looking in, things may look decent, things may look straight, but I got bills, man. Put me on the list, please.
Student loan forgiveness, I'm looking like, put me
on that list. Put me on one of them.
And see, the reason I use something as simple as that is because you can also look at there are other individuals that are not necessarily African American that are plagued with the same problem.
Very true.
How can we deny them?
Well,
unless we tightly prescribe.
We're talking about reparations, though.
This much is true.
So it's like that's specifically what we're talking about. So it's like that's why we would deny that. Like nothing against you.
Yes, and it's like but hence why you see the paradox they created. So the idea is going back to that Deborah Stone book. The policy paradox that we created here is that we are now creating an inequality here, even though it's a reparation. But the idea is that by tightly prescribing it and also looking at individuals within that same group set, it's no longer a situation of, racial inequity as much as it is addressing the potential. Now, I'm not saying this is not a perfect example because I was not prepared to answer this today.
Okay, all right.
I thought through this one, but using the framework and the logic of that, because the idea is we need to figure out ways to address the needs of the people.
Okay.
That's just an example because there are a whole lot of, what about the brothers and sisters that didn't go to college? So we just gonna do nothing for them?
Yeah.
No, we need to figure out specifically how we can address that. Okay. If you are a renter and you've historically stayed say I'm from Memphis.
Now, are you talking about, when you're saying this though, are you specifically talking about the Black community or are you saying, all right, just want to clarify.
If you're a renter
yes.
and you can prove that you've never owned a home.
Yes.
And your mama and them never owned a home.
Yeah.
Right? And they still living in the projects to this day. maybe you should be eligible for some kind of special federally backed loan program to be a first-time homeowner, specifically because your people have never had enough wealth in this country to own a home.
I like that idea. That's good. That's good.
A whole lot of wealth to buy a home back in the day.
Right.
And let's talk about the New Deal, which was a welfare program, right? Let's talk about all these different things that built wealth for Americans.
Yeah.
Well, let's look at what they did back then, and why don't we just apply that now and say that's what the reparations are. Giving cash payments, I don't agree with. Doing what you did for everybody else, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I mean, when we created all these
even the
different
playing
jobs
field
programs.
I mean, I think you said earlier, like the giving out a cash check, that's not going to cut it.
I mean,
inflation will go up.
We've seen it now, just recently, pandemic. Start giving out all these checks,
and look who here.
And now rent forgiveness. You didn't pay rent for all this time, and people stop working. So now, what do we have? Shortage of workers.
We do,
Going to fast food restaurants, they shut down for the day.
I went to a Family Dollar on Third Street just right before I came here, closed
because they don't have enough workers.
Yeah.
So you start handing out just freebies. And that's why I feel like. First of all, being an educator, I'm always an advocate of education because that knowledge that you give someone will help them, propel themselves beyond what you had them. It's that old adage, you teach me to fish, for a lifetime. Right. And so I got, you got to get that knowledge because a part of that, I believe, is that, there are generations that didn't receive that wealth of knowledge and how to manage money. And so, we just get a check, we spend the check. Nobody taught us how to invest or, how you put your money here and what you do with this. And, they taught us to save, put your money up under the mattress kind of deal, but never talked about investing. So I think that knowledge that, you start here and then that knowledge is passed down. Now we're creating something that's going to last a lifetime, not just a quick fix because, just handing out that cash. It's a quick fix. We need something more.
Man, very true, man. Side note, I thought this was pretty cool. So my mom went to Cincinnati and she went to the African American Museum there for her birthday. And I surprised her, went out there, joined her, and she went up there intentionally to trace her history back. And it went back, we got all the way to like 1868, something around that time. And one of my biggest takeaways was on my mom's side, and the men, like going straight up, right? Like I was one of the first ones who wasn't a farmer or a sharecropper. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's just hard to be like, okay, all right. So you telling me from 1860s until now, I'm like one of the first ones that's not doing it. Yeah. Just specifically on my mom going with the men. So that just showed me how close this was.
Oh yeah,
like this is like when you hear those situations, like okay, all right, so this is very recent. We're still fresh in this, and America's unfortunately still trying to figure out and navigate this, and then I feel like it's our job to help them because this is our community, our voice, right? With that being said, how do you all feel about like what would be the ideal celebration for Juneteenth? What do you?
Wow,
I'll tell mine in a minute, but what's ideal?
I think. The original, they celebrated. I know I was seeing something. They was talking about how I think there was a hibiscus tea that's like a red tea that they celebrated with, and it was different in different parts of the country as well. Because really in Galveston when it started,
I got a question about that.
Yeah.
All right, so you said. So what do you mean? There was a hibiscus tea that was used to celebrate?
Yeah, it was.
I did not know that.
Part of the celebration is red. So now that's why there's a red drink. Whatever kind of red drink you have is part of that celebration.
Hibiscus tea.
But different people did different things because it was really centralized, celebrated in Galveston for years. And then when people started to migrate and move, and then they started, continuing that celebration, people leaving Galveston and moving to Chicago or moving back to, Alabama or moving to New York, those people continued those celebrations. But then when they went to these different places, something new was added, because each place, each city, each state, has its own style, has its own culture. And things were added. But I just think, as we do now, African Americans, everything we do, we barbecue. But I think the ideal, because one is a celebration.
Yeah.
And, being a spiritual man, being a Christian man, I think that is a key part of it as well. Is that spiritual connection to the fact that it was a divine power that freed us. I mean, we can say Lincoln, we can say all this stuff. When they got there, they told us they were free, but it was divine power that made that happen. I think we can't forget that part. And we got to go back to that and say, first of all, Lord, thank you for that. Mm-hmm. We got to stop and say and give him his due, and not just celebrate and be happy and party or whatever. We got to stop and say, Lord, we thank you that you decided that enough was enough. Because he could have stopped at any point. We know that. But at some point he said enough was enough and let's free this. And so I think celebration is, like spiritual celebrations, church services, but also think about just celebrating our culture and just being excited to the fact that we are free-ish right now. Because, in some ways, we still got a ways to go.
Right. That's a great point.
I'll piggyback off of that.
Okay. All right.
What he said.
Yeah.
I was listening to a guy talk about, what he doesn't want to see happen is that it becomes a commercialized thing, and all of a sudden we walk into the store and get your red, black, and green, paper plates for Juneteenth. Instead, keeping it to the point to where, as a community of people, we use this as a time to not only educate our community, but reflect on what it truly meant to have a group of people and, who see these Union soldiers show up and say, y'all free. To reflect on the thoughts that they had at the time saying, so this enslavement that I'm in is over. What I would like to see, and this might have to come from the powers that be, is that just like we have on the 4th of July and, a grand celebration through fireworks and all that, what would it take to where, PBS during the day of Juneteenth airs a PBS special about the accomplishments of African Americans in this country? Where we're not just talking about, that's the day the slaves were finally, they're not slaves no more. Okay, now let's talk about how it didn't take us long to be.
You don't want Roots on repeat all day. I got you.
No, not Roots on repeat. I got you. To talk about the accomplishments of all of these wonderful people who have made our nation great. Because for so long, we talk about American history, and on 4th of July, people talk about George Washington.
Yep, very true.
And all of these, founding fathers who, did all this great stuff, and how we won our independence from, the British. Okay. Well, how do we talk about on our side? Now we're free. But in a very short amount of time, African Americans were able to accomplish this much. With a little bit more time, we were able to accomplish this much. And then we also talk about under all of the pressure that they were in during that period of time. I think that's important because it shows the resiliency of our people. Because so many times we're relegated to, in the beginning, there was heaven, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Then he made America. Then there was these slaves, but they got free. And that's it. That's the story of the black folk in America, right? We've done so much, even during that period of time of enslavement. Yeah. So how do we teach that history? So I'm going back.
I agree.
About,
a history and teaching of triumph.
Right.
There's so many stories. There's so many great people who aided us in our triumph, right? So, and not just the peaceful side as well. I think it should be a balance. Yeah. You see a lot of shows in America. It likes to focus on the peaceful protests, these peaceful things. It's like, hey, there was a Nat Turner out there. Right. You know what I'm saying?
And there was a need for a Nat
Turner. There was a need, right? And I think that's important. I agree with you. We hear things about like the fight with the British, the Boston Tea parties, and this type of stuff.
And black people were present to help that happen. Right?
Yeah. I mean, and that should be explained. So, man, that's a great point. I think it should be a mix of both. The cookout too.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You know what I'm saying? The education, the cookout. All of that in one. And my biggest takeaway, well, one of them, I've learned a lot from y'all during this conversation, but the financial side of hearing, hey, the reparations and even Juneteenth, us and advancing as people is going to start with us investing in ourselves, whether it's education and uplifting ourselves economically, uplifting each other, That's a huge takeaway from me, and I'm thankful that you all are doing things that brings light to that. You know,
I think we got to continue to come together. I mean, we always got to find an excuse, but this may be that excuse that yearly we come together to, like you said, celebrate each other, but also to begin to connect with one another and stop being at odds. Because I think so much right now that we are put at odds against each other that we cannot continue. We cannot progress like we should, because we're always fighting against each other. So this is the time, to shed light on the Black businesses that are not necessarily, on paper, or talk about the economic development in our country. Talk about affordable housing and what does that look like. But then at the same time, not turn that into another project. We'll take that affordable housing and those people that you put in those housings, or you're allowed to, live there, also educate them at the same time.
Yeah.
Let's not make this something that, okay, yes, I'm going to give you this affordable housing.
Yeah.
We'll make it, nice and neat for you. And now you're stuck forever. No, while you're here, let me help you. Let me show you. Let me teach you how you can now develop your own, create your own.
And upkeep it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Man, you come across, upkeep it. I'm talking about even like the landlord level.
Right.
If you're going to put them in, if you're going to fix it up, move someone in there, affordable housing, man, when things start tearing up, get it fixed the right way the first time.
Yeah.
It's so many, I've literally, I do real estate, right? So I pick up properties and I walk in, I'm just like, man, I can't believe, of course you wouldn't blame the tenant, but there's some things that you just see like, come on, man, this roof been leaking.
Right.
The floor, the plumbing been leaking. That's on you to get that roof fixed.
Yeah.
That ain't on them. So you got the ceiling caving in. It's like, so it's unfortunate. I think that unfortunately at some type of at a level, there are people taking advantage. And I walk in these places, it's usually us. It's us living there.
Yeah.
We're the ones that are the victims. So I agree. I just wanted to throw that out there on a if you own real estate, if you're investing in these people homes, do your part as well. Do right by them. Yeah. Really, I like that. Y'all got anything? No? Good conversation.
Definitely.
Man, I loved it, man. I'm thankful to have you all in here again. I've said it before. We're going to go ahead and end this edition of the Purple and Gold Table Talk. I will see you all next time. Oh, where can we find you all? I think that's important too. Facebook, Instagram.
I don't even know my Instagram.
Okay.
I'm not a
email
social media user.
Email. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, learn
Maryo
more.
Beck, MaryoBeck at iCloud.com.
Perfect.
That's me.
And I always give out you can find me at www.thebeth.org. I pretty much have an open door policy. So if you actually show up at the Bethlehem Center, come on in and have a conversation with me. And you can reach me at rsmith@thebeth.org as an email address.
Understood. Well, you can find me on Instagram, Legendary Haven, and I appreciate you all. We'll see you next time.
All right. Appreciate you.